Begin in the spirit of reconciliation by acknowledging the local Turrbal people, traditional owners of Meanjin, Brisbane, and the Gubbi Gubbi people of Moreton Bay and the Sunshine Coast. I offer my respects and gratitude for their culture and to their elders past and present. My name's Ryan Jones. Born in the 80s, I commenced primary school in 1990. It was a little over 20 years since the referendum, which, according to Price, set out to acclimatise Aboriginal children to the white way of learning. From memory, my classes had no Indigenous students present, or at least they weren't recognised or identified, similar perhaps to Sally Morgan's indigeneity. My high school, however, later in the 90s, had a number of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander students. Maybe I was more aware, or the students had greater identity, but it coincided with the Bringing Them Home report, in which Anna Heiberg points out no Indigenous family escaped the effects of the stolen generation. I became friends with many Indigenous kids as a teenager. The mateship came from a place of protection and empathy. I knew they were unfairly treated and compromised by the education system we were in, but I didn't know why, nor did I understand. But I wanted to help them. I was part of a silent apartheid where, according to Rose, students were being unfairly tested by a Western system which had got its heritage 1.5 minutes ago. The Indigenous mates I had were reflective of the deficit and attribute model Dr. Chris Sara talks about. I saw these kids struggle in the classroom, but excel in the sporting fields. They thought academically they would never be any good, but the playing field was more level when it came to sport. This is where many of them would claim their social identities within the school community. Dermot Sparks spoke of this construction of identity through societal stereotyping and how this bias influenced their self-concept. A key figure for me growing up was Steve Renouf. He was my favourite footballer. He lived locally, a Gubbi Gubbi man, and bought a house off my grandmother in Sanford. His involvement in rugby league continued post his playing days with Deadly Choices and other Indigenous education initiatives. I had the privilege of working alongside him in his role at Horizon, coordinating Indigenous training programs. He always spoke passionately about the prejudices which confronted him as a schoolboy in his community of Mergen. During the NRL's reconciliation round, he recently recalled the racism which occurred at his beloved Broncos football club. Although 30 years ago, it is the modern day lens Sarah Madison uses to shine a clear light into these institutions which house blatant racism and generate the collective guilt felt today. According to Kerwin and Van Issem, school as an institution began during a period in which colonisation spread its shadows across Australia. The major referendum of 1967 and the plethora of government initiatives which have followed have done little to change the systemic imbalance in schools. As Price recommends, we need to ensure schools are ready for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander students. During my time working alongside Steve, he talked about the earmuffs Indigenous children had to wear and that his parents encouraged him and his siblings to do the same. This was to conceal the racist taunts and vernacular commonly used across schools, sporting clubs, and society. However, as Collishaw states, it is the repositioning of Indigenous issues that now gives us the potential to challenge our education institutions. When it comes to my own practice, I want to be brave and I want to be authentic. I don't want institutions or the collective guilt to paralyse me. As Dr. Yunkin Porter wrote in his thesis, it is my goal to deepen the currently shallow perceptions of Indigenous knowledge which exist in classrooms and embrace the reconciling process as part of my daily classroom practice. The 8 Ways Learning Framework is a model I will adopt to achieve this goal. Its emphasis on narrative-driven learning, land-based learning, and connections to local community are methods I will integrate daily into my teaching. It is important for me that I incorporate authentic voices to achieve the deepening of this knowledge. The Australian Institute of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Studies uses over 35 ATSI people contributing stories of country, culture, and people. By adopting these authentic resources, I will strive to reduce the cultural interface that Nakata speaks of between student cultures. On week 1 of a recent placement with Year 6 students, they were studying an Anzac Day unit linking literacy, humanities, and the arts. Not one mention was made of the Indigenous connections. Brennan referred to the grey trenches as black and white servicemen fought side by side. The students are poorer for not knowing of this connection to country. Mendoza and Rees talk about this lost opportunity of children seeing other perspectives through storytelling and historic events. I take this as an opportunity for me as a pre-service teacher to overcome this bias and close the gap for future students. The notion that the Australian society is ignorant of its Indigenous past really irks Steve Renouf, and I don't want to be paralysed by this, but be emboldened by my past experiences and generate a much more informed and connected student to our country. Thank you.